mainstream media, political pundit talk shows. There's Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fed, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and today we have a very special guest, Andrew D. Basiago, who is a dear friend of ours, and we're very glad to have him back today. Andrew is the team leader of Project Pegasus and the founder and president of MARS, which stands for Mars Anomaly Research Society. He's an American lawyer, writer, chrononaut, and 21st century visionary. Andy served in Project Pegasus at the dawn of the time space age and was one of humanity's early Mars explorers. He is a prominent figure in the truth movement, leading a campaign to lobby the U.S. government to disclose such truths as the fact that the U.S. has achieved quantum access to past and future events and has used time travel to place a secret U.S. presence on Mars. And he has been identified as the first of two planetary-level whistleblowers predicted by the WebBot, which analyzes the content of the World Wide Web to discern global trends. His truth campaign about time travel and life on Mars is based on direct personal experience serving on two U.S. defense projects in the late 60s and early 70s. Andy was a child participant in Project Pegasus, which was the U.S. time-space exploration program at the time of the emergence of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community. He was called back into government service in the early 80s when he made numerous visits to Mars after being tapped to join the CIA's Mars Jump Room program for over a decade. Andy has investigated, it's longer than that now, his secret project experiences on a quest to prove them and to communicate them to others. Andy is a candidate for the 2016 U.S. presidency. And Dr. Leslie, would you like to say something before we bring Andy back on?
Yeah. Andy is giving us the opportunity to account for the information that has seemed unaccountable. And I've really looked at everything that he's written, and I can tell you that time travel is real and transportation technology is here, and our government has been lying and hiding. And Andy, it gives us a hope of living in the truth finally.
Andy, welcome back to our show.
Well, it's good to be back, Janet and Sasha. I wish I was there with you on Maui, but tonight I find myself in Atascadero, California. I'm on my way between Portland and Los Angeles to receive some medical and dental treatment. So I just thought I'd pull you here into Atascadero for tonight's interview.
Well, we're so glad you came on our show and you took time to come here, because our listeners, they love everything you bring to the table, and every time you're on, it goes viral. So we're so happy you're here. Thank you so much.
It's great to be here with you.
Well, we were talking before the show, and you want to focus on Gettysburg because you went there during your time travel experiments or experimentation or whatever you want to call it. Back there, you were sent back to Gettysburg in 1863. Then you returned there, what was it, a couple years ago, and you found out all kinds of things that corroborated your story. Can you tell us about your first trip back to Gettysburg in 1863? What happened?
In spring of 1972, when I had served as a child time traveler for DARPA's Project Pegasus, which was the U.S. time-space exploration program at the time of the emergence of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community, by spring of 73, I had been teleporting regularly across country and back. I had also visited the primordial and the ancient and sort of the recent past many, many times via chronovision. And then I had gone forward in time several times to 2013 and to include to 2045. So in spring of 72, my father took me from our home in Morris Plains, New Jersey via automobile to a time lab in East Hanover, New Jersey, which today it's the back half of a kind of an unusual building. It's a Presbyterian church on School Avenue in East Hanover, New Jersey. And if you examine that building closely, there's a brick attachment to the back of that sort of that frontispiece of the Presbyterian church that is identified as a daycare center, as a preschool learning center made of brick but with no windows. And that's a bit of a clue as to how it was being used in the early 70s as a time lab for the component of Project Pegasus that was being led by my father and Dr. Stirling Colgate, that was using plasma confinement to send children to the past, where upon spending several hours in a given past event, the effect produced by the plasma confinement chamber would wear off. It would diminish, and we would spontaneously transition back to the lucite chamber inside that brick building where the plasma confinement effect had been created to sort of temporarily insert us in a past event.
What is plasma confinement and the chronovision? Is that a physical thing, or is that just viewing it?
Well, what they knew is that physical teleportation to the past via Tesla teleportation, let's say, or some technology that opens up a tunnel in time-space through which you pass through, was limited for exploration of the past, because if they sent us to a past time before the advent of that technology, indeed, before, outside of a context in which we could literally be taken to a teleporter to get back to the East Coast and back to our real time in the present, we would have been stranded there. It is not axiomatic that you can't time travel before the development of the time travel technology you're using, let's say, to access the past or the future for that matter. In fact, you can time travel to a time before the invention of the time travel technology you're using, and in the same way that a person who jumps off a cliff has difficulty reversing the laws of gravity, you essentially fate yourself to be stranded in the past, because before the advent of the teleporters, there was no teleporter to get home back in the present. So they developed several other technologies. One, chronovision, which set up a hologram of the past event, which when you were immersed in it, you spontaneously went to that event. But when the hologram collapsed, when it just simply subsided, you were back on the stage of the device. In other words, we were standing on a stage and we would be enveloped by a hologram of a past event. As a function of Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, 1905, when the past was brought around us, we were brought to the past. We were brought inside of the past. And so there was actually a quantum paradox of the fact that the technicians in the room could see us be enveloped by that cube of light and then walk out of view inside the cube of light, a kind of a fifth-dimensional portal effect. In the case of plasma confinement, however, we were placed in a lucite chamber that was then filled with radioactive plasma. And through some means, I have no idea how they were able to calibrate it, but nonetheless, when we would be surrounded by this sort of opalescent, flashing, the opalescent flashing colors of the radioactive plasma under confinement, I had been warned by my father how once there was enough of that around me, I would fall downward as if a trap door had been opened. Thereupon, I experienced about 30 seconds of very violent wormholing, as depicted, let's say, in the feature film What the Bleep Do We Know. That was, in fact, the only pure wormholing that I would experience in terms of it branching in different directions and a kind of a roller coaster ride inside of this tunnel within the distinctively amber color of what we call the quantum plenum, which is sort of the interstitial medium between timelines. In my other tunneling, it was a straight shot via teleporter between New Jersey and New Mexico. This was much more violent. So in around late April of 1972, my father took me out to that lab in East Hanover on School Avenue, which is now this daycare behind the Presbyterian Church there, all brick but no windows for the kiddies. And he said, Andrew, I'm very proud of you as your father. You've done everything that you've been asked to do in the program ably and well. We feel that you've tried to serve to the best of your ability. So on your next trip to the past, we want to kind of give you a kind of a treat. You might even view it as sort of a privilege. And I said, what's that, Dad? And he said, we want to send you to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania on November 19th, 1863, to see President Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. And even though I had previously in real time in the summer of 1971, been sent, I would say, about 5 to 7 times to Ford's Theater on April 14th, 1865, to see who shot Mr. Lincoln that night at Ford's Theater, that wasn't as intimidating as the thought that sort of congealed in my mind when my dad suggested that this was my next jump, which was the notion of me standing. I knew that Lincoln had given the Gettysburg Address from a kind of a 3-foot platform, a dais, if you will.
Right.
And that he was essentially standing on the northern side of that dais, giving this Gettysburg Address via his unassisted voice to about 500 citizens of Gettysburg that gathered there that day. And thinking of that famous 1863 forward portrait of Lincoln by Alexander Gardner, where he basically looks like a very intelligent monkey in a black suit, the notion of standing there giving Lincoln the Gettysburg Address absolutely terrified me. I can compare it to how Margaret Hamilton playing the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, 1939, just scared the bejesus out of me as a little boy, at 3 or 4 years of age. And also how I was always kind of upset by Boo Radley, by the Arthur Radley character played by Robert Duvall in the film adaptation, Horton Foote's film adaptation of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, 1961. Mm-hmm. And even, I lost my train of thought there. Otherwise,
you felt terror. You're saying you felt terror.
The resolution of Three Faces of Eve with Joanne Woodward, where we find out that she developed multiple personality disorder by being forced to kiss her grandmother while her grandmother was laying in state as a deceased person. Those kind of haunting film images always bothered me as a little kid. They scared me. And so I was terrified by the concept. And I said, Dad, really, quite frankly, I've seen so much, the idea of standing at Lincoln's feet and looking up at him deliver such a great piece of oratory. Frankly, Dad, it scares me.
Wow.
And he looked over at Dr. Stirling Colgate, who was the director of that lab. And Dr. Stirling Colgate then was serving as alternatively as both the president and the chair of the physics department at the New Mexico Institute of Science and Technology. And that serves as one of the proofs of my time travel claims, my research into Stirling Colgate's accomplishments in applied quantum physics. But in any case, I begged off. And Dr. Colgate and my father looked at each other and Stir, as they used to call him, Stirling Colgate, whose nickname was simply Stir, suggested to my dad, well, Ray, why don't we come back in about a month and we'll see how Andy feels about this particular time travel. So I was watching the calendar all the way through May of 1972 until like May 25th. and my dad took me back, down Ridgedale Avenue, across the train tracks there in Florham Park.